I'd like to ask Frank Brown to come up to help with tag team this moderation with me. Frank's got information that I believe will be of value to everybody in the room on where the Guardians Initiative is at. Just to give a brief history of Guardians, obviously we need people to be on the land, to be managers for our people, for our communities. And the Indigenous Leadership Initiative started off focusing their energies and their attention on the creation of a national Guardians network. Using the Australian government's relationship with the Aborigines in Australia, where they have a very progressive program of creating Indigenous protected areas and associated Indigenous Rangers program. In my presentation this morning, I showed one photograph of one of those Indigenous Rangers using fire to manage their territories. So in Canada, we figured if Canada is going to move forward with the creation of protected areas, we wanted it to be Indigenous protected and conserved areas. But we also wanted to create associated Guardians program to help manage not only those protected areas, but the traditional territories of our communities. And Lutsel, Prairie will speak to that, but we started our program in 2008 in preparation for the day Tsetso became a reality. We would have some trained staff that can assume responsibility on day one, and that's pretty much exactly what happened. And the ILI, over several years at many sessions in Ottawa, knocking on and meeting with ministers, MPs, different parties, building the case for a national network. There was an ask for $500 million to build that network. Canada provided 25 to proof up the concept. And to speak to that, I'd like to ask Frank to where that network is at and where the concept is at.
Sort of a last-minute addition here. Thank you for the honor, Steve. I think the people that are on your panel have tremendous knowledge and expertise. We probably get to them right away because this is only a limited amount of time, but maybe just a couple of qualifying comments. So we did receive the 25 million to do the national pilot, and it was for both First Nations, the Métis and the Inuit. And then across the country, it wasn't that much money in reality. But I was on the joint working group, which was looking at proposals and developing a strategy with Canada on how we were going to deploy those dollars. And where we came to was we decided we would take a tiered approach, because there is not only a broad country, but a broad spectrum of capacity. And so there's some First Nations that are advanced, and there's a sort of a mid-range, and then where I would characterize them as tire kickers. They're just looking at Guardians, and there's a spectrum across the board, and we wanted to support everybody where they were at in their development phase, as opposed to holding people back or trying to keep it a general approach, because that just wouldn't work. And so we have deployed the money now, and the business case is being developed, and I had a chance to meet with the parliamentary secretary for the Minister of Finance, and what's going on in the country right now over critical resource development issues. And what I basically said to him was that the Guardians is a part of the solution to the issues, because to come into compliance about free and prior and informed consent and the duty to consult, that's the mechanism through Guardians to do that work on behalf of the First Nations. And so it creates it can, if it's properly resourced and the governance structures in place, be able to get to the shared decision making, because I characterize guardians as the sizzle, and the meat of it is building institutional capacity in Indigenous communities, because guardians are the eyes and the ears on the land, but that information has to come back to leadership, to elders, collect the data so that they can make informed decisions around whether it's land use plans, marine use plans. And so that is the real true benefit, in my opinion, on advancing guardians. And these people are the ones that are doing it. I think when I say qualified statement, I was the founding director of the Hilftzoch Integrated Resource Management Department. You always say follow the money. The money came from Coast Opportunity Funds, and it's been resourced by carbon credits. And then I went on and I was the Director of Land and Marine Stewardship for the Coastal First Nations, Central Coast, North Coast, and Haida Gwaii. We set up the Stewardship Directors Network and also trained 100 guardians in the last 5 years through a training program in partnership with the Post-Secondary Institute. So this is a pretty effective model, in my opinion. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Thank you. And I apologize, I'm cutting into your guys' time. I know you've prepared, so we'll let you have.
We'll sit back down.
Yeah, one at a time. Yeah, let's do that.
Frank is Dr. Frank Brown. He's got an honorary doctorate degree from Vancouver Island University for the work in the creation of the network. And so we'll come back and maybe add a few more words after the presentation. So as Frank's indicated, Vancouver Island University does provide training for the coastal guardians. Think about Aurora College and Guardians for the Boreal training opportunities.
Yeah, that it is a transferable model, and I think we could say that we want to support what's going on in the rest of the country. That's an Indigenous value to share, and yeah, good luck, guys.
Okay, so the first speaker is Dana Holtby, the Coastal Stewardship Network. Do you want to speak there or up here? It's up to you. I will give you a thing to click.
Can you hear me?
No. Turn it. Has it tilted green?
It is green, but
I'll try this.
Okay, how about now? That's better.
Good. So just press it.
Great.
Click forward.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, I think, Frank, you've done a great job of the introduction. I could probably just walk off the stage now. I feel like you've said everything. No, I'm really happy to be here on Yellowknife First Nation territory, and really happy to speak about Coastal First Nations and the Coastal Stewardship Network and the work that has been happening in the many stewardship offices over the last number of years. My name's Dana. I work as a training coordinator, so I'm super eager to speak to some of the things that Frank was already mentioning around the training programs that we run. But what I'll do is just give you a little bit of an overview of what Coastal First Nations is and the stewardship offices and the spread of work that's happening on the ground, because I will say there is a lot of it. It's very varied. People are working super hard. And once I've spoken to it at a regional level, I'll pass it over to Doug, who can speak to it from the perspective of the Guardians in the Kitasoo-Xai'xais territory, because they are doing a lot, and they're doing a lot of really interesting things. And yeah, you guys are just getting it done. So a little bit about CFN. Coastal First Nations Great Bear Initiative is an alliance of 10 nations along the coast of BC, on the central coast and the north coast, as well as Haida Gwaii. So you can see the nations on the map there, with the exception of the Kikatla Nation that's located up north near Metlakatla, that's just recently joined the network. A little bit about Coastal First Nations and the Coastal Stewardship Network and how it all comes together. The Coastal Stewardship Network is one of the program areas of CFN, and it's really the network of the stewardship offices of the member nations of CFN. So those stewardship offices comprise stewardship directors, like Doug, the Coastal Guardian Watchman programs, and the many other things that they're doing. And myself, I work for the CSN team down in that bottom corner, and our work is really to support all the things that are going on in those stewardship offices. So we have a program manager, a regional monitoring system coordinator, and data analysts, and I'll speak to these 3 different areas a little bit more. Myself as one of the training coordinators, and we also have a communications coordinator to help share out the stories. But we really get our direction from a few different places. One is the board of directors of CFN. That board of directors is made up of elected chiefs from the CFN member nations. And we also get direction from the Stewardship Directors Committee that Frank mentioned, that Doug sits on. And we also have a newly created technical advisory committee where more operational staff come together and we sort of discuss the nitty-gritty of making the stuff actually happen. So I'll say that the Coastal Stewardship Network really comes together to work in that coordinated way, and the primary goals are to increase capacity in stewardship, but also to increase the authority of nations to govern their own territories. So my favorite thing to talk about is, of course, the Coastal Guardian Watchmen. They are the eyes and ears on the land and water. They're the folks who are out there patrolling their territories. And I'll say that our network, the Coastal Stewardship Network, it started in 2005 as the Coastal Guardian Watchmen Network, and the name changed in 2011 to reflect a broadened mandate to not just be about guardians, but about the stewardship offices. But the core of our work often is really related to the guardians and the work that they're out doing there. So they work for their nations, they're hired by their nations, and the guardians are all trained technicians. So they do just a huge amount of work in different areas. A lot of it has to do with researching and monitoring, but they increasingly educate and do outreach work. So there's, you know, if you're on the Central Coast, if you're in Kitasoo territory, there's a huge number of sport fishers that'll be in that area, tons of tourists, and the guardians are often the ones that they first encounter when they enter into territories. So they learn about the territory, they learn about the laws of that territory, and the guardians work to make sure that they're following them. So they're incredibly important and increasingly important, I would say, to making sure that those land and marine plans are really implemented. And I know when they were organizing this session, we were asked to speak to some of the struggles, and I'll say that a struggle that I think most of the Guardian teams face is that there's just so much work that needs to get done, and a lot of that does get placed on the shoulders of the Guardians. So from any given day, they could be out there, you know, doing scientific monitoring research in collaboration with the university, and then the next day they might get called out on a search and rescue mission, or there might be an entangled whale in the territory, or you know, in very unfortunate cases, an oil spill. So guardians are called upon to do a huge myriad of things, but yeah, I'm just consistently impressed by the professionalism of the guardians and how hard they work. They're out there patrolling, they're doing the hard work. A little bit about our funding structure. I'll just speak to this very briefly. It's been mentioned before, but there is a little bit of a difference between the nation level and the regional level. So at the nation level, it's been spoken about a bunch today, but there are carbon credits that are administered through coast funds and through coastal First Nations. Our funding structure at the regional level, we get funding from private donors, from foundations, from NGOs, and we do also get funding from both the provincial and federal level. So examples of that, you know, at the provincial level, we have received funding for some of our training programs through the BC Ministry of Advanced Education, Skills and Training. And at the federal level, we have received funding through the Environment and Climate Change Canada Guardian funding as well. So in terms of the work that the CSN team does, a core of it is supporting those Coastal Guardian Watchmen teams. Some of it is developing regional policies and procedures. A big thing we've been working on for the last, I'd say, year or so has been around safety policies, so making sure that the Guardian teams have the support they need to operate safely, to get home safe, come back home to their families. We also produce outreach materials, so Guardians get brochures they can hand out when they're in the field. They have nice spiffy uniforms, and they have flags that fly on their boats as well, so that they're easily identifiable. We also do work to support the planning in those offices, so we'll go and meet with the stewardship office and the Guardian teams and help them with their strategic planning for the year or getting ready for the season. And of course, we do things like raising awareness about the Coastal Guardian Watchmen, which is part of why I'm here today. So a big initiative that we have as well is the regional monitoring system, and this is something that I'll say I think a lot of our partners in the province and within the federal jurisdiction get really excited about, which is the regional monitoring system. So this system is owned and operated by the nations, and it really came together because nations were seeing similar issues out in the field, and you know, as unfortunately often happens in past, there would be researchers that would come into the nations, they would collect data, they would leave with the data, and they would not come back with the data. So the regional monitoring system is really developed so that guardians can be the ones that go and collect that data. And you can see in the photo here that happens through tablets that have a custom-built app called the Coast Tracker. So guardians go out in the field, they open up their app, they input data that's based on priority areas that are determined by the nation. They come home at the end of the day after their patrols, they upload that data via Wi-Fi. It goes into a central server that's located in Richmond. And then the guardians or their managers or their directors can go via the web portal and access that data. And I'll say a big thing that we're working on right now is really digging into the data analysis. The guardians have been out there for a number of years. They've collected a huge amount of data. So right now, our regional monitoring system coordinator is like very busy. She's in the depths of weeding through all the data to make it a little bit more accessible and a little bit more readable so that it can really feed into decision-making processes. So again, the key there is that that data is owned, it's governed, and used by the nation so that they can make decisions in their own territories. Okay, my favorite thing to talk about, the training programs as the training coordinator. We run a whole bunch of different training programs in different areas, but the core training program that we've been running for the last number of years is the Stewardship Technician Training Program. So Frank has already mentioned this, and Frank was quite key in the creation of the Stewardship Technician Training Program. Just within the CFN Nation, we've had over 50 students go through it, and there's been other students go through it from the Nawakolis Nations, and the training program is also spreading through other nations as well. Yeah, over 100 have been through it, and I think that number is probably going to be higher by the end of this year too. So this program is considered kind of our core training program for the Guardians. It was built in collaboration with Vancouver Island University, and it's a 2-year program where students go through in a cohort. They take 14 different courses. They get 5 industry-recognized certificates. They get university transferable credits. They get a huge amount of technical knowledge by coming through this program. But what I think is probably more important, the sort of big lesson and big thing we've seen through this program, is that it has just a huge impact on the students that participate. This program has really been the bread and butter of my work for the last 2 years. I've been in the classroom with these students, and it's incredible to see the transformation that they go through. If I had more time, I could spend all day telling stories of the experiences that students have had, but I'll just share that a thing that I've heard over and over from graduates of this program is that not only have they found a sense of family within the cohort that they participate in, but many of them have really found their voice, and they've found their place as stewards of their territories and as leaders in their community. So I really can't undersell how important these training programs have been in building capacity, but in really just like building the spirits and hearts of the students that participate. So right now we're actually undergoing a big evaluation of that program with the help of Ecoplan International. So this is my pitch to all educators in the audience. I'm really, really keen to learn about best practices, particularly for land-based education programs. So if you have thoughts on how to make things better, please come find me. I would love to talk to you. And then I'll also just add that we do develop custom courses and workshops in a number of other areas as well to support the stewardship offices. An example of that being we had a project management training that happened this January for management staff in the offices. Another component of our work is really around networking and collaboration. This is also really fun stuff. We have an annual gathering every year where the Guardians come together from all of the member nations. We're going to Clemtu this year. Very stoked about that. We also have monthly conference calls where Guardians call in and share what's going on in the field, and we often bring in experts to sort of share or allow for learning in the slower months. We coordinate learning exchanges. This past summer, we had Guardians from Arctic Bay and Nunavut come to Bella Coola to do an exchange with the Newhawk Guardians. That was really wonderful. And of course, we provide support to the Stewardship Directors Committee and the CSN Technical Advisory Committee. And finally is that piece of sharing stories. Our communications coordinator, Fraser Loss, works very hard to help share out the hard work that the Guardians are doing. The stewardship offices and the Coastal Guardian Watchmen are doing really innovative things, and the programs are constantly growing and changing. And it's really wonderful to be able to share out the strength and real vitality of these programs as well. So it's a wonderful thing to be able to share out. So I'll end it there and pass it back over to Doug, but thank you so much, and yeah, educators in the room, please come find me.
Okay, thanks very much, Dana. So we're going to do questions at the very end of all the presentations. So the next presenter is Doug Neasloss.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the host nation. Thank you for allowing me to be here and share some of my work. And also Tanya and Steve as well for the invite. My name is Mukwes. My other name is Doug Neasloss, and I work as a stewardship director. I have a long background in tourism, which I'll talk about tomorrow. But I also have worked as the elected chief for a better part of 8 years, and I just finished that sentence about a few months ago. So now I'm just focusing mostly on stewardship. So a bit about my community. I come from the central coast of BC, which is kind of right in the heart of the Great Bear Rainforest. Very small community, about 350 people, and home to the Kitasoo-Xai'xais. And I've been a stewardship director now since 2011. So I was hired by my band to develop a stewardship program, which is very broad. So it includes watchman programs, science programs, land use planning, marine use planning, language programs. So it's quite broad. So I've been a part of the Watchman program really since the beginning. We actually started developing our Watchman program before the stewardship department even started. So, and also been a part of that. But just speaking of some of the history of the Watchman, we've actually always had Watchmen in our territory, dating back thousands of years. And so here we have a pole. The photo on your right is a photo of a watch pole. And today we call it an arbor glyph. Is carved in a tree that's still alive, and these poles were put either in front of personal property, such as a house, or on a boat, or in front of a community, and the belief is that they would watch over and protect the community or the personal property. But it was also a station for the young men. So as a young man, one of the first duties was to stand beside this pole and watch out. And if you saw something in the distance, maybe a canoe or a big party, you would have to send warning to your community. So the community would either be prepared to run and hide or to go out for a battle if they had to. So we've kind of had a long history of watchmen and as designations of the young people, that was one of the first responsibilities. So this here is the Great Bear Rainforest. It has a long history. Back in the 90s, the provincial government was going to log all of this area out back then. It wasn't called the Great Bear Rainforest. It was known as the North Coast Timber Supply Area. And so it led to a lot of direct action from the nations to protect this area. And so they ended up coining the term Great Bear Rainforest to bring some international attention and awareness to this area. And at that time, we pushed both industry and government to start setting aside protected areas. And so in the early negotiations, the province wanted to turn these areas into parks. They wanted to turn all of these into Class A park or recreational parks. But if you looked at the designation of parks, it made it really challenging for First Nations access. So we could no longer hunt and fish in those areas. And so the communities said, no, there's absolutely not. Are we going to turn these areas into parks? And so we developed a new designation called Conservancy, and that still allowed for our traditional use in those areas, whether it was making a canoe from a tree or whether it was hunting or fishing. So that was extremely important. And we ended up agreeing to set aside about 85% of the Great Bear Rainforest. And so which is quite a large area, so all the areas in green are all the protected areas. And so in my traditional territory, the photo on the right is we have about 55% of our territory now locked up in some sort of protected area, so no forestry, mining, and those sort of areas. However, after we finished developing all these protected areas, we were still running into a lot of illegal activities out in our territory. And our area is so remote. We live on a little island in the Central Coast, and we just kept on seeing a lot of different problems. And in particular, illegal fisheries was a very big issue for us. We would experience a lot of commercial fishermen, recreational fishermen would come in and harvest things like abalone. This used to be a once abundant shellfish, but the commercial industry basically cleaned it out. Now it's been on the protected list for about 25 years. But we would find when all the dye fisheries would come in, they would harvest their sea urchin, all the abalone would go missing, and we would do surveys before and after, and that was just a constant problem. Illegal hunting was a major issue. And here of our communities, we protected a big chunk of our territory, and we were trying to develop a tourism program to go out there and view these bears. But we kept on running into people shooting bears illegally, and some of it legal as well. But people would shoot them for their gallbladders. We would constantly find dead bears with their heads chopped off, the fur would be gone. And it was a constant problem. It was another major issue that we were experiencing in the area. We even had a case of illegal forestry. We had one guy that came in and basically cut down a huge tract of forest, had 0 permits, and so we caught him red-handed. He had to give all the wood back to the community. But again, we just didn't see any enforcement agencies up where we live. We didn't see BC Parks, we didn't see Flynn Row or Fish and Wildlife Branch. Another major issue was our cultural sites. And so we have thousands of cultural sites scattered throughout our territory. This here, this photo on the top right, is a photo of a place called Dehcho, which is probably one of the most sacred places for my community. This is kind of the gathering place where people used to potlatch, and people used to go there during the banning of the potlatch in secret at this place. And so more and more tourists started to find out about this location, and they actually started to go to these sites and carve their names in the poles. And so the elders were absolutely pissed, about what was going on. And so they wanted to start setting aside some stronger protected areas, and of course having people monitoring some of these sites. Burial sites is another one. We had people that were opening up burial boxes. The community was ready to shut down all tourism in the territory because of how sacred some of these sites are. And then, of course, tourism, which was a relatively new industry in the early 2000s, and it started to grow bigger and bigger. We would have some ships would unload 200 to 300 people, tromping down the estuary. Of course, people were chasing bears all over the place. There was no management, no structure in place, no one to enforce the laws. And so that created a big challenge. And again, one of the big issues is we would just never see the enforcement agencies. These are a bit outdated maps. These are from 2014, but they haven't changed. We never see BC Parks in our territory. We never see Flynn Row. We never see Fish and Wildlife Branch. We would never see Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And so we asked them to put GPS trackers on their vessel, and they would come up about 1 or 2 days a year. And so BC Parks would come up the most, which was 2 days a year. And so that explained why there were so many illegal activities. And so it was quite frustrating for the community just due to the lack of monitoring, the lack of management. And so my community gave me crap and said, go out there and develop a watchman program. They said basically 2 things to me. They said, don't let someone clean up your house. Don't let someone else clean up your house. And they said, lines on a map do not protect areas. People do. And so they said, get your own people out there, get men and women from our community, train them up and make sure that they have a presence on the water, on our land. Make sure they're enforcing our laws. They said there's British Columbia law, there's Canada law, but there's also Clem 2 law. And so we started a new mission to create this program and get these guys trained up. So we started our Watchman program in around 2004, and when we first started, we had no money. So we had enough money to buy a small little vessel. That was our first Watchman vessel, a little 18-foot vessel. We were able to hire 2 people and get them out there. And we didn't really have much. We really just had a pen and paper and then their street clothes, and that was kind of the beginning of our Watchman program. And so we really started to focus on training, and we wanted to look at building out this program. And so in the early days, I remember we met some guys from Australia, and they had one of those Palm pilots at the time, and that was their data collection, which was really neat. And so we wanted to learn a bit more about the data collection. We knew we wanted to collect more data, and so we basically flew over to Australia, got to learn about their model, and we took that back into our communities and started to develop the database on what we wanted to collect data on. And then we basically started using the Palm pilots. And so we would collect data on all the vessels, whether it was commercial vessels, recreational vessels, on bears, on crab traps, prawn traps, basically everything. And when the guys would get back to the office, they would upload it via Wi-Fi. And as a manager, I could go online and I could see exactly where my staff have gone, what data they've collected, and that's been extremely valuable. And other areas outside of that. So we're using some of that data for our negotiations with DFO on the crab fishery, for instance, and now we're setting aside food fish areas for our community. So there's a lot of valuable applications in which you can use the data, but that was extremely important. Again, we still had to look at a few things in around permitting and funding. And as a manager, that's kind of our job, is to kind of provide those tools for our watchmen to make sure that they can exercise some of these things out there. And one thing we always want to do is kind of expand our watchman program. Anyways, we wanted to look at the way the system was, and we want to go look at what sort of permits are out there. And we found out pretty quickly that BC Parks had their own park permits that they would give out to all the tourism operators that would operate in our territory. And that was kind of their rules and regulations. They would also charge a park fee, and that park fee would just go into general revenue for the province. It doesn't go into any increased management in our territory. And that was kind of their permit system that they were able to apply provincial laws. And so we asked the province at that time whether we could be a part of that. We could implement some of our Indigenous law or CLEM 2 law as a part of their document, and whether we would have some sort of revenue sharing agreement around the stewardship, or the fee that they charge. Unfortunately, there was no appetite, and there was other legal issues why they couldn't do that. So we basically said, listen, CLEM 2 is a level of government. We're going to do this regardless and develop our own system. And so we did that. We developed a protocol agreement, and we put all of the rules and regulations for our nation. We implemented our Indigenous laws through this agreement. And then we also decided to charge a sustainability fee. And so we have two types of fees. If you're a non-extractive company, we charge you $15 per person per night in a territory. And then we have an extractive fee as well, so $25 per person per day if you're sport fishing, for instance. And so we charge these structures. And I remember going down, this is probably now 15, almost 20 years ago, we went down to all the tourism companies that were just starting in our territory. And these guys would pay the government, the province, a fee. And so we told them, listen, if you're going to operate here in our territory, we want you guys to sign our protocol agreement. We want you guys to pay our sustainability fee, and as well as do that with the province as well. And so about half the companies liked the idea. The other half of the companies kicked me off their boat and said, well, how dare you try and gouge us? We pay the province already. Why would we pay you guys? And so some of the boats asked, well, what are we going to do with the money? And we said, we're going to take 100% of the funds. We're going to put it back into a watchman program, and that's going to increase the monitoring, increase the management of the territory, just because we don't see anyone else. All the operators saw all the illegal activities that were going on at the time. And so half of them supported it, and they really liked it. They went on their websites and they said, we're supporting First Nations, we're supporting local monitoring, local enforcement. And then all the other tourism companies came on board. They saw that their money was being used properly. It wasn't just going into the slush fund with the band, and we were putting all the money back. And so then we got 100% of the tourism industry on board. Then we went after the sport fish industry, same thing, we engaged them. And the president of their organization said to me, all you Indians want is money and control. And so we had a big battle about, this discussion about protocols. And so we spent the next few years negotiating, trying to get them to understand what we're trying to do. And then they finally agreed to start paying our sustainability fee. And so that was just a few years ago. And then we also went after Forestry as well. And these guys are making millions of dollars in our territories. And we wanted some money to be able to cover the watchman program, allow us to expand. And I'm a firm believer that the cost of watchmen should not be on local communities. If the government didn't give out permits, we wouldn't have no reason to monitor or manage. And so we feel that the industry should be a part of that as well. And so we set up our fee structure, and now I would say we have 100% of all industries on board. It's worked out extremely well. All the industry now by default have become watchmen. So that allows us to increase our presence, our eyes and ears on the water. Half our calls come from these companies now that say there's a suspicious looking boat up here. Can you send our watchmen up there? And it's been quite good having everyone on board. So that was one fee structure. Another important part of our fee structure was the Coast Opportunities Fund. So because we protected 85% of the Great Bear Rainforest, we were going to lose out. We were going to lose out on some economic opportunities. So we wanted to create basically we negotiated an agreement with some of the environmental groups. So there was groups like the Nature Conservancy, which is now Nature United. There was Hewlett-Packard Foundation. There was Moore Foundation. So all these different groups help us fundraise a bunch of money. So we created a $60 million endowment fund. This money was put into an endowment fund. And the environmental group said, we'll give you this money if the federal government and provincial government match this money. And so that's another pot, which we'll talk about tomorrow. But on the conservation side, it was really important because we took the $60 million, put it into an endowment fund, and basically that money will be there forever. So small communities get about $250,000, large communities get about $500,000, and this is based on about a 4 to 6% return. I would say over the last few years, we've been getting around 6%, so we've been getting around $500,000 for a small community, so the numbers fluctuate a bit, but our bare minimum we'll get is around $250,000. So we use a big chunk of this money to fund our Watchman program, pay for their equipment, pay for their training, and then on top of that, because we protected all of these areas, it also led to some carbon credit opportunities as well. So because we protected 85% of the Great Bear, those trees are doing something good. They're sequestering carbon, they're releasing oxygen. You can measure that, sell it. That also was used in our Watchman program, so a big part of our expense. And we also have an economic fund, which I'll talk about tomorrow. So. But anyways, we decided to take it and really focus on building the capacity with the Watchman. One of the things that we want to do is focus on uniforms, making them look professional. With the data management system, we put a lot of time and effort in that in terms of building the database. Now it's moving away from those little Palm Pilots into now almost like an iPad or something like an iPad. And then branding the Watchman. So everybody on the coast knows there's a Watchman program. Everybody knows they can no longer do illegal activities. We have brochures that we pull up to the vessels, we engage them. And so everybody knows there's a presence from our Watchmen. Again, the Watchman program, we probably work for about 7 months out of the year. We're out there every single day. So if you were to compare both the provincial and federal presence on the water, again, they're out there for 2 days compared to our Watchmen that are out there for basically 7 months out of the year, every single day. And these are all GPS tracks of where they go. So it's been extremely valuable. They cover every inch of the territory, and I'm happy to report that today, illegal activities have fallen off the map, so we just don't have any illegal activities anymore. So again, we're doing a bunch of different things, whether it's assisting with some of the research. We just did a whale disentanglement training course this year. They're assisting with oil spill response, monitoring of tourism, and a whole bunch of different activities. Sorry, I know my time is up here. And I just say, one of the things I've learned throughout a lot of this process is just the collaboration. I think this is extremely important. Every year we call every stakeholder that works in our territory, and we meet with the provincial government, and we basically ask 3 questions. We say, what worked, what didn't work, how do we improve things? This has been a really good relationship. We're working with each one of the stakeholders. We're working extremely close with the provincial government. Just literally a few weeks ago, they agreed now that they are going to give our Watchmen provincial powers. And so they'll have, for the first time ever, have the authority now to issue fines and tickets and enforce some of the Wildlife Act or the Parks Act. And so that's extremely important. And again, I think that just came from a lot of building those relationships over the last number of years. And we've had this meeting now for probably the last 6 years, and it's just gone super smooth. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Doug. Okay, thanks very much for that. That was a great presentation. And next is Dahti, Tsetso, and Mike Lowe. So I'll just put your pictures on here. Yeah. Yeah. It's playing.
Here, I'll push over.
Yeah, sorry.
Here, I'll sit with you over. Okay. Hello again. So a big part of my work the last since 2014 has been to try and work with our member communities and with Dehcho AAROM to start developing our own version of the Coastal Stewardship Network. So in the Dehcho, it's known as the Dehcho Keondi Stewardship and Guardians Program. And we're just going to project pictures from projects and programs over the last few years. It's kind of a full circle moment because when we first started off, we hosted learning exchanges and we invited people into our workshops from the Coastal Network and also from Lutsel. We've had people come in from the Labrador, the Innu from Labrador. And these learning exchanges have been fundamental in helping us to grow. And so now we're in a position where we're being asked to go and support other First Nation communities and share our stories and our understandings. So what we started talking about at the regional level in 2014 was in response to protected areas. And the conversation was, how can we start working to implement stewardship from the Dene perspective? I think at the time I said, what does conservation mean from the Dene perspective? And we started off relatively small. We started on a on-the-land workshop outside of Sambuk A, outside of Trout Lake. And we had just a small group of people come together to talk about this new question. And over the course of a year, it kept growing. The conversation kept growing. More communities started joining the conversation. And what came out of it at the end was a vision for Dene-led stewardship. And it was, we titled it Dehcho Keondi, which means taking care of Dehcho. And what the region wanted to see was programs that were led by communities, led by Dehcho Dene, that implemented taking care of the land based on Dene laws, Dene values, Dene principles, that strengthened Dene language, and that supported youth and elder mentorship. And as we started to learn from other communities, we started to learn about the power of those guardian programs. And so after a year or so of doing this work, we started asking the questions, what about guardians? Could we, should we, what do you guys think? And the response was, yes, we should. We already are, and let's find ways to formalize it. So the approach that we took was to build off the successful work of Dehcho AAROM, and in a minute I'll hand it off to Mike to explain what that's about. But that Dehcho AAROM already had community-based monitors in all of the communities who already did what we were learning guardians do, which was monitoring, mentor youth out on the land, spend lots of time out on the land. So we thought, let's build off of the work of Dehcho AAROM. And since we've started to do that, it's given us a framework to garnish more partnerships, and so we've been able to secure successful agreements because of that. So one of them was the environmental management agreement that we worked with 4 communities on in the region in 2018 in response to a pipeline replacement project. There's a picture of some guardians on that work. And then the other one was the ADEGI agreement that I spoke about this morning. So the program itself has given us like a vehicle to work towards finding resources for this work, because one of the things I realized quickly once I was tasked with trying to help build this program is that we had no resources for it. And so I think at the beginning, you made a comment, follow the money. If you followed our money trail, you would end up in Never Land. It's ridiculous. Trying to build these programs from scratch with no resources. So we helped support the Indigenous Leadership Initiative when they were lobbying nationally. We lent our voice to their cause. So we were grateful and happy when there was some seed funding. I mean, 25 million isn't at all close to 500 million, but it's something. Anyways, there's still lots to do. There's growing pains. We literally just hosted a regional gathering last week in Fort Simpson where we had all the communities come together and report back on, where the regional program is at, review like what the original vision for that framework was, and then have an opportunity for all the communities to share what they're doing at the community level, and then of course have some interaction and feedback on like how to keep growing. And there's still lots that we're not doing perfectly. There's still lots that we need to do, and so it's still a growing process. But I remember when we first started and having somebody from the Coastal Network in our community and asking them, like how long did it take you to start, and when did you start, and how long did it take you to get somewhere? And I think his name was Ernie. I can't remember Ernie's last name. Yes, Ernie Talio. And I remember he said, I started like 5 years ago. I was like, whoa, 5 years ago? Okay, that's manageable. We could get somewhere in 5 years. So it's 2020 now. It's been 6 years, and we've gotten somewhere. And so those learning exchanges have been so valuable because it helps us build capacity, it helps us learn from others, and it helps encourage us to keep going, because sometimes it's, like I said, it can be very difficult to do this sort of work. That's a pretty broad overview of some of the stuff. Not going into too many nitty-gritty details, but I'm going to hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Dahti. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Dehcho AAROM program, which is very proud to be a part of the Dehcho KOD and also in the creation of the Dehcho Guardians program. So the Dehcho AAROM program has been running for about 10 years and was originally a program to manage fish and aquatic resources. It's actually a DFO-funded program. And we went and stuck with the AAROM name, so now we're stuck with it forever. But in the Dehcho, there's the fisheries is subsistence-based pretty much. It's all food fishery. And a lot of the other AAROM programs dealt with large-scale commercial fisheries in the millions and millions of dollars. So we had to take a different approach to manage these fisheries. So in the beginning, we had many community meetings, gatherings, fish feasts, fish fries, anything you could do to get people together to discuss what kind of concerns and priorities they had in their traditional areas. So with each First Nation, not at a regional meeting or a meeting held by an NGO, but with each community. And after that, it was clear that we asked them, what they wanted, and what they wanted was that Indigenous people were the best conservationists and the best at managing resources, and that they wanted their people out on the land to be the eyes and the ears. So this formed the basis of our mission statement at the time, was basically to have more NWT people on the land managing fish and aquatic resources. So that was at the beginning. So it was just purely fish and water. And to get these people out on the land initially, we had some funding with our core AAROM agreement, so we got boats for all 9 communities in the Dehcho, and this allowed the land users to get back out on the land. And then it was up to the communities to select individuals that were experienced on the land and that could become this initial round of guardians. And at the time, we referred to them as AAROM monitors, community monitors. And it was just me and George Lowe and some people at the DFN. Dahti was on her first stretch of maternity leave at that time. So we got around, and all the communities, they selected an individual, and eventually it became 2 individuals. And that was 10 years ago, and now 10 years later, each of those programs is now running with those same 2 individuals. And they've received both formal and informal training in both being on the land, safety courses, scientific methods, different monitoring practices, and we've had help from tons and tons of organizations. ENR, DFO has given us money, but we've also, all the community organizations, groups like Tides, all the individual First Nations, they've all jumped onto this program, this initiative, and it's what's brought everyone together. So now these guardians are treated with as much respect in the communities as doctors and nurses and teachers. So people now want to be out on the land, and they want to protect their own land. So I'm getting a little bit off course here with my notes, but so the AAROM monitors, they're all experienced on the land users, and this is the most important qualification, is that they know the land. So and not only that, they know the tradition and the history. So when they're out there, they're the ones that are seeing the slumping shores, and they're seeing fish kills, or water that's not the same color as it used to be, or snow that's different texture. They're seeing all this stuff, and they're reporting it, collecting it, reporting it, and then eventually it moves down the line, and it becomes a bigger concern, and we build the monitoring, our management plan behind it, and then we get on it, and then we start building these programs that have really taken off in the Dehcho. So some of them, like in Dehcho, they have a Creole survey that they've been doing for over 10 years, and that's actually, the data from that has been used by DFO. We've given it to DFO to lower catch and possession limits. We do water quality work with ENR, so they've supported us for almost 10 years now, and we do all the ENR water work in the Dehcho. We do stock studies for DFO We do wildlife and bird studies, ecological studies on the Great Slave Lake. We do stream surveys with the cabin program, benthics looking at insects. We have a world-class mercury study that's going on in the Jean Marie River First Nation area, and it's actually gone from a mercury study to a food security study and to getting people back on the land fishing and to reviving those harvest rates, subsistence rates on those lakes that aren't really fished anymore. So it's now turned into a whole community-led program, and that's because of these guardian programs. So these are just, I'm getting a little off here, so I'll end it, but these are just some examples of the work we've been doing over the 10 years, and so hopefully this kind of program goes on forever. Thanks.
Thanks very much. I love the enthusiasm up here. Okay, our last speaker on this panel is Prairie Desjarlais. So I'm just going to get this set up.
Tlandea, Sizi Prairie Desjarlais Huya. And I just said, how are you? My name is Prairie Desjarlais. I'm going to be presenting today on the Ni monitoring program. We do have a summer program, but what happened? This newly program that just started in January, it's brand new, and we're carrying into the winter, so this is like brand new. This presentation is really fresh. This picture here is like 3 weeks ago of Caribou. That's a Camerieric herd. So I'm going to be presenting today on our winter monitoring program. I would also like to ask Laura Jane Michelle to come up here. She helped me in a lot of the in-reach stuff and stuff like that. She helped get the monitors on board. So she's younger than me, but she's going to be doing this someday. So she's got to come up too. So this is Laura Michelle. She works in the, I work in the Tsetso department. I used to be the Tsetso program manager, but recently we restructured, and now Iris Catholic is the manager, and I run the Ni program full time. Laura works in the wildlife department. She takes care of all the GIS, in-reach and stuff like that, SAT stuff. She trains the monitors, because we all work together. So this picture here was taken in January. I think I already said that. That's a Camerieric herd. I can't really say that name. Really healthy herd, really tasty. The caribou's different. They're smaller. So this is my presentation. So within our program, we have 4 full-time Ni Tsetso rangers. We have 2 seniors and 2 juniors, and then the other picture, that's me and my staff. We just took off 100 miles per hour in January with this program, so we just got the skidoos and the sleighs, and then we got our outfits, and it just really took off. The intent of the new program through Tsetso is to monitor and watch the caribou. With the decreasing numbers of the Bathurst herd, we have had widespread concerns for the herd. The caribou has been our main source of food for thousands of years, and we wanted this program to protect the herds and monitor. The program runs from December to April annually because we travel by skidoo and we travel on the ice, so that's why we run during that time. The goals of our new caribou monitoring program is to monitor the caribou, monitor the hunters and their harvest, monitor the Ni cabin and relines, caribou sampling with sampling kits, which we already started with Dean Clough. Practice and promote healthy hunting practices, take youth out hunting and teach them how to hunt respectfully. The monitors also share meat with the local elders and people that can't get out hunting, so it's shared. To monitor the land, animals, ice conditions, and also to report Wildlife Act violations to the local ENR officer. On January 29th, Lutsel First Nation has agreed. The membership in the community had a big public meeting, and they had a vote on the Bathurst herd, because the Bathurst herd, as you all know, is in really serious decline. That's one of the big reasons why we're monitoring. We got this caribou monitoring on the go. So they had a community meeting on January 29th, and the membership voted not to hunt the Bathurst herd for 2 years, and then look at the numbers again and go from there, because we live off the Bathurst herd. That's what we eat, but we wanted to protect and get their numbers back up. The training just started. Like, as I said, we took off 100 miles per hour in January. So I had a trail mark consultant, Beth Keats, come up. She trained our monitors with the InReach and the CP5s. And this gives our staff a chance to document everything and keep in touch through their locations. I actually have monitors that are out in the Bearlands right now texting me on my phone saying, we're here and here, and I'm like running in and out. And so it's a pretty good tool. It also shows where they are and stuff like that. Beth Keats is also developing a toolkit for the monitors. And Laura here is pro on the CP. They have CP3s. Those are going to be, they're not going to exist. So they're going to get into the CP5s. Laura did do some training with some of the monitors. And then we have Dean Clough from ENR. He came with about 20 sampling kits for the caribou, and he gave them a crash test course. And we already have a couple sampling kits that we gave to our local ENR officer just to check the herd and check if there's anything wrong, because we're eating like that Carmiaric herd right now. These are our monitors gearing up for their daily patrols out in the area that they're monitoring. I think this one is in, this is by number 7 Lake by Wolf Creek, which is where they are. They have a tent there. We have a cabin in Reliance, but they have a tent by Wolf Creek, so they can monitor all hunters that are passing through, or just count how many caribous they shot and stuff like that, and the report comes back to us. Mission of the Ni Dene: protect the cultural sites and the natural beauty in the area, welcome, host, and provide interpretive tours for visitors in the area, monitor and document visitor activity, cultural artifacts, and environmental wildlife values, teach cultural knowledge to younger generations. The Dene realized that without formal protection, Taitan Nene may no longer remain as it always has been. If this landscape is to remain for future generations to enjoy and use as they have since time immemorial, the Dene must take action. Tsetso, our big boss here, Iris, talked about her for a bit this morning. Within Taitan and Nene, as you all know, we voted last year on a park. One of the big things on our park was Tsetso, that's our granny. She's actually in the park, and that's where we go every year in August for a spiritual gathering. With that, she played a big role in the whole Tsetso and Nena and protecting and preserving our land. She's right in the park, and now she's going to be protected and will be protected as well, because we go there every year, and this is very important for our people because she's our granny and she helps people that are sick and stuff. So our granny is forever protected now, which has great meaning for the Lutsel people. Also with Tsetso and Nena, a big thing is elders, what they say to us, we listen to them. And another big thing about Tsetso and Nena is protecting and preserving the land for our youth and future generations. The Neahadni Rangers on patrol. These are the rangers. Like I said, this is a fresh picture. They monitor the caribou, observe the health of the herd. The Neahadni Rangers often travel within Tsetso and Nena where local dinner harvesters hunt to ensure the dinner harvesting protocols are followed. Just dinner laws, I guess that's what they follow, because that's how we live, right? Neahadni Rangers on patrol. These are just some pictures of them on patrol. Dinner monitors. They travel like really long ways. They go to the barrens, so they come back and then they give the report to me, pictures, and then now they're just setting up in our community. It's called a Caribou Disciplinary Board, I think. So it's going to consist of 4 elders, and if we have people, even if it's our own members out there disrespecting caribou, not taking everything, stuff like that, the monitors are out there to monitor, bring back the information to me, and then if there's stuff where they're not practicing Dene law, we'll be bringing it to the elders committee, and then they'll figure out the disciplinary actions. I don't know if I said Neahadni means watchers of the land in Chippewa. And I would just like to thank everybody that has supported the Tsetso and Nena initiative and the guardianship program. I'd like to thank all the sponsors. It's been, since I started this job, it's been like probably, I've been sleeping 4 hours a night. But actually it's better now because we have Iris, so then I could just strictly focus on the Neahadni program, which is, it's good for me, it feels good. I'd like to thank Steve Ellis. He's one of my greatest mentors. He's been Tsetso and Nena since I started, and I always got advice from him, showed me how to do stuff and all that. I'd also like to thank Stephen Nita. He was our lead negotiator for this, and Larry Ennis, he's not here. But within the Neahadni program and Tsetso and Nena, the Neahadni program is always going to be running in the park under Tsetso and Nena. So with that, I had so much written down, but I think like I said, we just took off in January. We do have the summer program, but I wanted to focus on this new program that we started. So I'd like to say Marcy Cho.
Thanks, Prairie. All right, so that was the last speaker on the panel. So we only have about 5 minutes to the break. Steve, do you want to sum everything up, or do you want to let people ask questions? Okay. Is there anyone who has questions for any of our panel members? Oh.
Thanks for all those presentations. It was really interesting. I've just have a question. I think, guess for all of the panelists. The first, you talked about a university program and a couple of years, but it was also land-based, and so I'm just interested in how much of the training has been land-based, how much is, in a classroom, that kind of thing, from the different kinds of training programs that are out there. Thanks.
Yeah, so in the, you can hear me? Okay. In the Stewardship Technician Training Program, there are 14 different courses, and so it sort of varies a little bit from course to course. Some of them are a little bit more land-based, but I will say that we probably spend at least a quarter to half of each class inside. So there is a substantial classroom component, and I think, part of that is the structures of working within a university system. Sometimes to meet those accreditation requirements, you have to be in the classroom doing certain written assignments or things like that. But as much as possible, we try and push the university and try and push those courses so that we're outside and on the land as much as possible.
Our whole program's on the land. Just kidding. No, we just started. So, with the winter monitoring, we just started. So the two trainings we had with Dean Clough and Beth Keats, it was just for the afternoon. It was just crash tests. And then most of the other training is TK knowledge, traditional knowledge from our seniors. And they're out there, like most of their time, they're out there. It's like 1 week on, 1 week off, and they're on a schedule. So, but as we're getting more and more like professional, there's going to be lots of training coming up and stuff like that. And it's going to be, with our training, it's kind of different because we have the senior monitors and then we have the juniors. The juniors are good in their gadgets and technology. And then with us older ones, like me and the seniors, we're like, oh, okay, how do you do that? And so we're taking, the juniors are actually teaching our seniors, and our seniors are teaching them the traditional way. What we try to express in our program too is mentorship. We have a lot of people that haven't been to school, or some haven't been out of the territory. We don't want to discriminate, so we have a lot of people that have TK knowledge, and then we have, it just keeps going on and on. So yeah.
I'll talk about, in the beginning of the AAROM, it was there wasn't much of a structure for any courses, and actually it was Aurora College offered 6 weeks at that time, or 4 weeks if you did it without the weekends, to teach environmental monitoring and training, and it was more of a course that they would design to what you wanted to do at the time. They no longer offer it, but there's another company that Dahti can tell you about. But they, at the time, they would just teach basic things, transferring photos from digital cameras, recording observations, different types of fish sampling techniques, wildlife sampling techniques, just very general stuff. And then the big one we invested in with everybody was the small vessel operator proficiency, and then the Med A3 for working on a commercial boat or any boat. And but both of them are expensive. They were about $25,000 each at the time to run a full course, so that right away would take all your funding away. Since then, we've been working towards getting a more structured course with more everybody having a standardized set of courses. And I'll let Dahti tell you about those, and then so she doesn't get off the hook for free. But anyways, I've noticed that there's more and more private companies coming out with short-term courses to provide training to guardians, and actually Wendy from West Point First Nation, we've just the past week been talking about getting a fish inventory course going in Hay River, so for all our guardians. So that's sort of where we're at when we talk about training, is looking at what's out there and then taking the opportunity.
Yeah, it comes back to finding the money for things. So in our case in the Dehcho region, For the most part, training's been a little bit ad hoc, like as opportunities come up and as there's resources, we opportunize on them, and they might be project specific. In 2018, when we came into the agreement with Enbridge, we got a bunch of resources that year to implement guardian training. So that year we ran a 7-week guardian training program, and we tailored it to the needs of the project. And we made space in it for Dehcho AAROM guardians who are throughout the region, so they weren't just with the project. So we hosted training for 30 guardians to go through a 7-week program, and they got a wide range of skills. So they got that monitoring certificate program, boat operation, got PAL. We tried to tailor it to ensure that they were safe on the job and in the field. And then with a Dehcho, again, that's another, it's literally following the resources. A Dehcho represents another resourcing opportunity for the region to train up guardians. And so a Dehcho guardian training plan is going to be developed, and so there'll be opportunities there for more training. The challenge that we find always is around resourcing and trying to find funding to offer training. And I think like it's really cool to hear about the Coastal Stewardship Network, because they're like just ahead of the A game on everything. And so it would be great one day to get to where they're at, where they're like not just doing guardian training, but they're also doing train the trainer training. So, because that's the other aspect is guardians require training, but then people who are in my role also require training. And sometimes we end up getting a bit neglected. But it's important stuff. So anyways, the answer is we're trying, and it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I guess for me, I would say, I think Dana kind of answered some of that, but I would say we try and focus on both land use planning, marine use planning. I would say it's extremely helpful to have the Coastal Stewardship Network, and their job is to kind of find the funding, interview all the communities and find out what are the priorities. But we want to be able to go back to the provincial government or the federal government and say, our people have the same sort of level of training that you guys have. And I think that puts us in a better position to have the legal authority to implement and steward the territories. And so that's a big reason why this year I think we finally got the recognition from the province where they're going to give us some authority under provincial law, although we're still going to implement our own Indigenous law as well. So I think both are important.
I always forget to say so. I also forgot to mention with our program too, it's like train a trainer. So we have our juniors that actually start as juniors that progressed into seniors. So a couple of years ago, I had the original knee juniors who progressed into seniors but don't work anymore. I actually had them training the new monitors on fish sampling and water quality. So it's kind of like passed down, and you keep it in the community where you can be self-sustained, where you don't need to go out and depend on funding and other stuff like that, but you can do it in your home, and you can keep all that data that you send out and gets lost. You can keep it there. And so, yeah, that's a big thing with us too.
Okay, great. And with that, it's time for our break. Oh, okay. Sure, go ahead.
Hi. Prairie, you mentioned something that really turns me on. You said caribou. All these people here I know are secret caribou turn-oners. They're not going to admit it, but they really get turned on by caribou. I do anyways. My husband got his head down. Anyways, he just lets me. He just knows I'm crazy and he just lets me. Anyways, you said that herd that was shown the picture weren't very old. Your ranger group, do they have a good gauge on how healthy your herd is, and what herd is that exactly? That's the first question. The second question is, I read something the other day that said that Lutsel is part of an Indigenous group, including Nunavut and NWT, that have signed an agreement for barren ground caribou. I wonder if you could just clarify for me what is the reason for that?
So your first question, the Camriaric, that herd you see on the first slide, that's the Camriaric herd. That's a herd that comes from way up north. We've seen it, I think we've seen it about 2 or 3 years ago. 3 years ago. But now that herd came back. They're kind of different. They're smaller, the thighs are smaller, the legs are shorter, but it's really tasty. It's like, yeah, it tastes really good. The meat is like really juicy. And under the Caribou Stewardship Plan, we actually have a Caribou lady here that's working for us. Her name is Lauren King. She's a consultant. I'll get her to answer that question for you, Ethel.
It's, can I just say this? It's those little short legs that make them such a turn on. Sorry, I couldn't help it.
Just to add a little bit to what Prairie was saying, the Lutsel Dene First Nation has developed their own Caribou Stewardship Plan over the last, I don't know, over a year through lots of caribou talks in the community. So this is a plan that was developed by and for the First Nation. And it covers caribou that the community hunts. And so we developed respectful harvesting protocols based on Dene ways of hunting and being on the land, and also a monitoring component, which is the Ni Hot Ni Dene, and then an enforcement aspect, which Prairie talked a little bit about the elder committee that kind of will decide if Dene law is not being followed or respected, kind of the restorative justice approach to fixing that situation. So that plan is available, I believe, on Land of the Ancestors website, or you can connect with Prairie and she can give you a copy if you're interested.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I think we should just go to a break right now. Everybody needs a coffee or tea, so and we'll come back in like 12 minutes after. Yeah.